Okay, so today we're going to start chapter 7. We're going to go through halfway through the lecture. The current class average on the last quiz is a 93. The quiz prior to this one on chapter 5 was also a 93. So good work. So if you haven't taken it, you have until midnight tonight. Let's see what else. Midterms. There is no midterm exam. There's just a midterm grade. And it will be comprised of 6 quizzes and one exam. The one exam is going to be worth 60% of the grade, and then the 6 quizzes will account for 40%. And then, so the midterm grades are due not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday. So I won't be entering the grades until after everyone takes their quiz by Monday midnight. So I will be entering your midterm grades either Tuesday or Wednesday morning. It all depends on if everyone takes the quiz on time. Does anyone have any questions? So there's no midterm exam, but you will have a midterm grade. Nothing? How's Patrick this morning?
Dragging a little bit.
Are you?
Sorry. Yeah, I just barely made it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of dragging too a little bit. I don't know why. Because I went to bed early. I don't know. All right.
Daylight savings time.
It might be. I think it's also the cold.
Yeah, I know that sucks. It sucks when you get those tease periods too, where you get that.
Or you get what? You muted yourself.
Yeah, that you get that little bit of mental hope. It warms up for a few days, and
Oh,
then
T's. I get you. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
I was thinking like TS.
yeah. I probably took my hand off the button at that point.
No, no, you said everything right. I just didn't understand it. So, moving on to chapter 7, physical and cognitive development in early childhood. So, we consider this or these years the play years. Will see more physical developments. Um, we'll see some improvements in thinking. We'll see some individual differences in how we develop, both physically and cognitively. And then, of course, this is where we have massive improvements in language development. So, physical development, the body growth slows and our proportions shift. The child's shape more closely resembles an adult's, becomes more streamlined. It's not like this big head, big torso, and then, small limbs. But we start to see individual differences in our sizes because we know when we're first born, you know, how noticeable is it if a baby is, 8.5 pounds versus 8 pounds, Our posture and balance improve, which support gains in motor coordination. And then we have skeletal growth. So new epiphyses emerge. What does that mean? My heat's too high. I gotta turn it down once. Like, what does that mean? Epiphyses. What are those? What if I said epiphyseal plates?
Oh, those are your growth plates.
Good. Where do you find those?
They're at the end of your I should know this. I've taken a whole class on this. They're at the end of your like leg bones
Just your leg bones?
and like your like anywhere like close to where your joints are.
Right. So we call those long bones.
Yeah, your long bones.
And so we're talking about your femur, your tibia, your fibula, all your phalanges, your radius, your ulna, your humerus. Anytime there's a long bone, it's going to be ended at towards the end of it. It's going to have this little plate, this growth plate. And so, how does it work? How do these work? What happens? essentially.
They have the growth cells in there. Hold on,
Mhm.
my bunny's being. Hold on.
So what triggers the growth though?
I'm sorry. What was that?
What triggers it? Like what's
Oh,
happening?
hormones. I should know this. Professor Jolliker would be so disappointed in me, but it's Monday and I'm not awake.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Human growth hormone, that's one of them. Yeah. But also what physically happens though is these plates at the ends of our long bones like break. Like they like break. And so every time they break, they form new cells to take the breaking up. So they'll like if it's a long bone here, it'll like snap a little bit, and then bone starts to grow where that snap is, which makes it longer, and then it'll break again, and then cells will develop again, and so they just continue to break. Anyway, and one of the therapies for um, children who don't um, who live a sedentary lifestyle for one reason or another, like they have some sort of physical malady, they will put them in these machines, and they will have them like these machines will like pound their feet and pound their arms, and so what they're doing is they're trying to break those plates so they'll grow. Let's see, they'll lose their baby teeth. This is all part of your skeletal growth as well. And that so now there's an emphasis on early dental care. Brain development. Cognitive capacities increasingly localized and distinct neural systems. Okay, so it's not just all these, neurons developing, trying to form as many connections as possible. Now they're trying to specialize what connections are responsible for what. A rapid growth of prefrontal cortical areas that are devoted to executive function, decision making, problem solving. The left hemisphere is especially active, supporting language skills and handedness. Now, if you are right handed, it's going to be your left hemisphere that's going to control the movements in your right side, right? So, if the left is also responsible for language, this has a lot to do with handedness because we'll understand when we pick things up with our dominant hand, it's directly communicating to language areas. So this helps advance language development. So you're saying, well, if 90% of people are right-handed, what about the left-handed? The left-handed people you see predominantly in the left hemisphere for control, but there's a lot of activity in the right hemisphere as well. The right hemisphere is active. The right hemispheric activity steadily increases for spatial skills that develop gradually through adolescence. So, spatial skills, we're talking about understanding where things are in space, um, the physical properties of objects. Like if you look at this remote, right? So, spatial skills. So, if I were to hold it like this, and kind of turn it like this, can you imagine what it would look like not going back this way, but going this way? And so you would see this. You would see the little lip on this side instead of it on this side here. So that's all due to spatial skills. So if I give you this image and this image, they say, well, what if you keep going? You should be able to predict that it looks like this. So, handedness reflects dominant cerebral hemisphere, right handed 90%, language housed in our left hemisphere, left handed 10%, often shared by both hemispheres. The influences of our handedness, we have a genetic bias for right handedness, again, because it's so um, strongly linked to language development by being able to coordinate with our physical environment, physically with it. Um, Practice at complex skills, there's cultural variations in schooling. And then lastly, if there's some sort of prenatal or early damage to the left hemisphere, it may result in left-handedness because if you got damage to your left hemisphere, someone's got to control your right side. Again, that's that whole plasticity. Other advances in brain development, the cerebellum. nicknamed the little brain for motor coordination, fine motor movements. The reticular formation in your brain stem for sustained, controlled attention. The amygdala, processing of novelty and emotional information. The hippocampus, long term memories, spatial understanding. The corpus callosum, that bundle of nerve fibers that travel from the left to the right hemisphere, that enables more complex, coordinated movements and thinking. So when it comes to, say, walking, you got to be able to coordinate between your left and your right hemisphere. So here's looking at a cross section of a brain, and here's the brain stem, and right about here is the reticular formation. Up here would be the medulla, and don't worry about that. All right, so cerebellum back here, the corpus callosum here, the hippocampus, the amygdala, and then the pituitary gland. And the reason why they're bringing the pituitary gland up in here is because it's considered, the master gland. It's basically controlling all the other glands in the body. Heredity and hormones. Genes control the body's production of hormones like growth hormone, which leads to the development of body tissues. And then there's thyroid stimulating hormone, which leads to brain development, and also it provides growth hormone support. So growth hormone is released by the pituitary gland. The thyroid stimulating hormone is released by should be the pituitary, but I'm not sure now. One second. That bothers me. Hold on. The hypothalamus releases thyrotropin releasing hormone, which stimulates the pituitary gland. Okay. Pituitary gland then. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. All right. So they're both released by the pituitary. I don't know why I drew a blank on that. All right. Well, I would know that. I would know that. The pituitary. I would know it better than me. Okay. Nutrition in early childhood. Our appetite begins to decline due to a slowed growth. We require high quality diet in smaller quantities. And if you think about how you raise your kids and how people in schools and in daycares are always like, send snacks, not meals, snacks. Poor quality diet is associated with tooth decay, obesity, cognitive defects, and behavior problems. The wariness of new foods is adaptive. What does that mean? It means that when children say, like, I don't want to try something new, it's adaptive because if it's worked in the past, that means they've learned that it's okay. These things that I've had in the past are safe to eat. Why mix it up? Why take risks? Why try? I keep trying new things because eventually I'm going to try something that I shouldn't. So, but it's still important. We will imitate others' food choices. So that's going to be, environmental um, or external learning or influence. Repeated, unpressured exposure to new foods promotes acceptance. So they're saying, all right, so your kid didn't like carrots and whatever, peas or whatever the first time, keep giving it to that person. Keep giving it to your kid, and eventually, they'll accept it. But don't push it on them. Questions? All right. Infectious disease and malnutrition. Poor diet depresses the immune system. Illness reduces appetite and limits nutrient absorption. This will hinder physical growth and cognitive development. And know this, because I've asked this question before. Diarrhea is specifically a danger in developing countries. So how do we treat this? Oral rehydration therapy, meaning drinking, and zinc supplements. So know that diarrhea is a real problem in developing countries. Diarrhea in children. Immunizations. Widespread immunization has led to dramatic decline in childhood diseases in industrialized nations. Why many US children will lack immunizations, however, is due to partially the cost of them. The parents' stressful daily lives. They just don't want to take, they can't, or they don't want to take the kid out to get their shots. There are misconceptions about vaccine safety, right? So some people are concerned about mercury, right? These we do have mercury-free vaccines available, and there was this belief that it was leading to the increase in autism. There is no link to that. There's one person that said that lied. And then there are also parents' religious or philosophical objections, right? Um, yeah, government can't tell me what to do. You guys, quiet, kids. Anybody want kids? I got a 15-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son. Anybody want one of them? Both of them. Patrick, come on. You've broken them in before.
No, you missed your opportunity just like I did. You should have sold them on eBay while they were young and cute.
While they were young and cute. That's right. Now they're just puberty and stinky.
Yep.
Annoying. And look, now they're running. Okay. Unintentional childhood injuries. This is the leading cause of childhood death in industrialized nations. These are largely preventable. The most common causes are auto and traffic accidents, suffocation, drowning, poisoning. Factors related to childhood injuries, gender and temperament. Who's going to be more prone to physical injuries, boys or girls?
Boys.
Yeah, because they like that rough and tumble play, right? Single parenthood, low parental education. Again, parents' daily stresses. They're not watching their kids as well as they should. Societal conditions, poverty and rundown, crowded homes and neighborhoods. A shortage of high quality childcare. Parents who are teenagers who just are irresponsible, don't know that better, that kind of thing. Developing nations where overcrowding and there are weak safety measures. Moving on to motor development. We have gross motor skills and we have fine motor skills. Gross motor skills, large, walking, running, jumping, catching, swinging, riding. We see that our balance during our childhood years will improve. Our gait, which is our walk, becomes more smooth and rhythmic. Our upper and lower body skills combine in more refined actions. There's greater speed and endurance. So think of a child who starts playing t-ball, right? So you have to coordinate. Look at children who are just starting. It seems so ridiculous, but little kids who are just starting to learn how to throw a ball. Like you think, man, that's so obvious. It's like you literally have to teach kids that with your throwing hand, you go opposite and your other leg is the lead leg. Like if you're right-handed, you're throwing a ball, like you actually have to teach them, put your left foot forward when you're doing it. It's weird, but you actually have to teach them that. Fine motor skill. They will figure it out eventually. But when I was coaching t-ball and grasshopper and you name it, all these different baseball and softball for my kids, like I would literally have to teach them how to throw a ball. Fine motor skills. They develop more self-help skills like dressing themselves, feeding themselves, drawing, painting. The progression of their drawing skills in the first, around the second year, they will start to scribble. But then they develop their first representational forms. Oh, this is a house. This is a dog. This is a cat. Between 3 and 4 years of age, where they start to draw their first recognizable pictures. They'll use lines for object boundaries, but they'll put the figure in the simplest form. And the most common one is they'll draw like a dog and it looks like a tadpole. They'll draw a cat, it looks like a tat. If you look at like a person, you take a 3, 4-year-old and ask them to draw a person or even a face, it'll look like a tadpole. Then they'll put the features inside it, like eyes, and they will develop between 5 and 6 years of age more complex drawings, and then early printing between 4 and 6, where they start to realize that writing stands for language. So printing is, A, B, C, D. Cultural influences. So why are children from Asian cultures advanced in drawing? Why? Because they have curriculum from the age of 3 years old on. They have like a standard. You must learn art. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because if you look at Chinese writing, it's caricatures. It's very like ornate. Ours is kind of like our language. It's very brute. So this curriculum encourages mastering specific steps and skills. Parents and adults teach and model the drawing, and the mastering the Chinese writing characters enhances their ability. So in contrast, US education emphasizes independence, finding one's own style and not imitating others, right? So think of like, do they still teach cursive? Does anybody know? Patrick, don't you have like teenage kids? Wait, I have teenage kids. You guys learn cursive writing?
We learned it in like
In 3rd grade?
Yeah.
3rd grade?
Yeah.
Are you asked to ever use it?
No. There's one kid in my class that uses it only. But that's the only kid that I know.
How would they teach it in 3rd grade?
I have no idea.
And then not again?
No.
Anybody else got something to say about that?
I just
Well,
asked my son. He said they're not teaching it.
in my school, we were required until from 3rd to 5th grade to write all of our homework and assignments in cursive, and if we didn't, they wouldn't accept our assignments.
Huh.
Yeah, a little different.
Where'd you go to school, Sage?
NAC.
Northern Adirondack. Yeah.
If they don't teach cursive, then how do they expect people to sign their name?
That's why they taught us.
Yeah, my daughter, who's 15, who knows everything, said that's why they taught him. But they're not reinforcing it though. They're not like requiring it. I mean, how often do you sign your name for school-related purposes? Huh. Yeah. Interesting.
I sign my name all the time at work. But like I was just curious, like, how do you have your own special signature?
Right. Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with this, where it says finding one's own style and not imitating others, where we have our signatures, like our signature. Like mine's
Yeah.
a mess. Mine is a nightmare.
You got a doctor's signature.
Yep, that's what I have. I mean, you could read the J and the P, but that's about it. That's all you can read in my signature. But I don't care as long as it's consistent. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
Let me see something here. Just curious. Turi, you still awake? I feel like Turi just checks out.
Yes.
Hey, do you know how to write in cursive?
Yeah, I went to NAC.
All right. What about Bree? Cooney.
Yes.
Yes. Come on down. Allura, do you know how to write in cursive?
Yeah, I just suck at it.
Yeah, I'm bad at it too. What about Ariaga?
Yeah, I do. I also practice like calligraphy, but that's like for fun, not for writing. I
Yeah.
guess. I don't know.
Oh, I've always wanted to try that calligraphy. It looks so nice.
Yeah, me too. but I can't
I
even
do
write
like
in
the
cursive.
fake one, like you just like fill it in. I don't have like the pen. You did like the brush markers.
Mm-hmm. 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 I see what you mean. I know what you're talking about. Still, I couldn't do it. Wow. Okay. Individual differences in motor skills. Motor means movement. So when it comes to gender, boys excel in skills using force and power. Girls excel in skills using balance and agility. So it's interesting. Has anyone ever seen that show Survivor? Heard of that show Survivor?
Yeah.
And so the idea is they have to be like basically they have to last on this like this it's like usually like a beach or whatever. It's a group of people that's isolated and they have to last based on, they got to either not quit or get voted out each week. And so in order to survive, um, you have to perform the best and make these alliances with other groups so you're not voted out. And so they'll have different tasks. And so my wife was an avid Survivor fan, um, to the point where she'd record them because she thought, and she was actually way out of her time, honestly. I'm going to give her some credit on this one. She thought that Survivor, when it first came out, was going to be a big deal. And the reason why is because she thought that there was some sort of scientific value to the show. And so she'd record the show and then actually write notes about what happened in each episode. And she joined this Survivor forum where they would talk about all the things that happened because she wanted, and she's not even a psychologist, but she had the idea of studying the individuals in this reality show through the show to see what the psychological implications were. And she told me, she taught me this little factoid that when people were eliminated and the sexes were off balance, they changed the tasks for immunity. Here's what I mean. If there were a lot of women left, or if there were significantly more women left among the group, they would develop a task that required better aim, which typically men outperform women. So it kind of increased the odds that the males who were competing had a better chance of getting immunity, meaning not being voted off. When the men outnumbered the women, they had other tasks like balance, where they'd have to stand on a totem or something, and women were better. They would always outperform the men at these tasks. Or if it was something that required fine motor movements, if they had to like run thread through a thing or and then do something with their fingers that was fine motor, that would also increase the likelihood that the women would outperform the men and one of them would get immunity. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Okay. But I thought that was pretty clever of my wife to notice that, to catch on. Because like I remember like watching a few episodes with her and she'll say, oh, look, they're gonna do something with throwing, or they're gonna do something with language, or she'll give me all the different skills that women were better at than men typically, and men better at the women typically. And she'll like look at the layout and see if there was like twice as many men. She'd say, okay, they're gonna do something with language, or they're gonna do something with fine motor skills, or they're gonna do a challenge with balance. And sure as crap, they would do it. I don't know. It was nice. Practice will lead to individual difference in motor skills. Gross motor skills will develop through playing. Fine motor skills develop through daily routines. And then lastly, adult encouragement. Are you, throwing the ball with your kid? Are you sledding? Are you, doing physical things with your kids? Back to Piaget, right? So we covered the sensor and motor stage, right? So it's all of us developing and learning through our physical interactions with their environment. So during the pre-operational stage, the second stage, we have significant gains in representational activity, right? So there's symbolic things happening, imaginatory or imagination play, that kind of thing. But we still have these limits in thinking, he said, because we are egocentric, we are incapable of conservation, and we lack hierarchical classification. I'll explain what all that means in a second. So the development of make-believe play. With age, make-believe play gradually detaches from real life conditions. It becomes less self-centered and it becomes more complex. The socio-dramatic play is when we are working with others to create a story. We're coordinating with others to develop a plot with different roles. The benefits of make-believe. These contribute to cognitive and social skills. It strengthens our mental abilities like executive function, decision making, problem solving, memory, logical reasoning, language, literacy, imagination, creativity, emotion regulation, right? If you get now, if you're working with someone else and it's like this, I'm the king and you are the serf, it's like, hey, I'm the king and you're the serf. Hey, that they're maybe another kid goes, I'm a queen and you both serfs. Hey, right. So you got to be able to control your emotions. And it allows you to better take another's perspective. Dual representation. Maybe we don't talk. All right. So egocentrism, I guess thought we talked about it, but like soon, but I guess not. Egocentrism, the idea is that you can't imagine the world without you being the star in it because that's all you know, right? So you don't understand that things exist without you playing a role in it because that's literally all that you've been exposed to. Lacking conservation, which I know we'll talk about in a second, is your inability to understand that even though something changes shape, it doesn't change amount. Even though something changes like organization, it doesn't change amount. And then the lack of hierarchical classification, it means we lack between 2 and 7 the ability to separate meanings and put things in a hierarchical order. And there's an example of that later. Dual representation. This is fun. So in one study, what they found was they showed this kid like this little model of a room that had like like a couch and it had a chair and then it had like a TV and like a table lamp and a coffee table and it had like a little book on it, right? This little model of this room. And then they take this little like dog, I think it was like a Snoopy dog, and they took this little tiny little model of Snoopy and they put it behind the couch. And they did right in front of the kid behind the couch. And the kid's watching, you know. Then they open the door and there is the room. It's the same colored couch, same colored chair, organized exactly the same way. And they say, go find Snoopy. And the kid goes right behind the couch and gets Snoopy. That's dual representation, where they can see that things in the model represent, they're both an object and a symbol. Like that little couch was an object, but also symbolized a real couch. So this will emerge at age 3, and adult teaching helps pointing out similarities of symbols to the real world. It helps develop our understanding of maps, photos, drawings, and make-believe play. Here's egocentrism, right? The failure to distinguish others' viewpoints from one's own. It leads to animistic thinking, believing that inanimate objects have lifelike qualities and magical beliefs. So what does that mean? It means that, oh, my little puppy is a real puppy, this little stuffed dog, right? It prevents reflecting on and revising faulty reasoning. Yeah, just it's the first bullet or the first dash, right? The failure to distinguish others' viewpoints from one's own. So here's how they would test. This is it's called the three mountains problem or the three mountains test. And so what they did is they had this little girl here or this kid here looking at this mountain that's green with a little house on it. And behind that is this larger mountain that's brown with a red cross on it. And then behind that one is a very large mountain that's white snow capped. And then on the other side, you can see there's a little dowel. And they asked this child, what does the dowel see? And this child says, the dowel sees a house, then a cross, and then a snow-capped mountain. Where in fact, the dowel should see the reverse, the snow-capped mountain, the cross, and the house. Because this child can't imagine what it's like to view the perspective of the dowel. Because they can only understand their own perspective. Does that make sense, Patrick? Because you're squinting a little bit, which might mean something. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm kind of caught on the whole egocentrism with magical beliefs,
Okay.
how that works. Like, how does that lead to that? Like, failure to distinguish others' viewpoints lead you to believe in magic and whatnot. Guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I myself was wondering where that would lead to that. And my best guess would be that they noticed it and said it must be linked because children at this age have a lot of imaginary play and they think that, dolls have real personalities and things like that because they're imposing it on them. So
So
rather than them,
basically,
because
if they
can't,
see it that way, they have to believe it's true.
yes, exactly. Exactly. Because the dolls can't have their own personality. They're giving it to them. They don't mean to, but because that's where their perspective is on them.
Okay.
Right. So here's like little Susie, whatever, whatever. Here's Bobby, something, whatever, whatever. Susie's a little, spunky one. And then Bobby, he's, real quiet and shy and whatever, whatever. They're putting that on the doll. Okay. Good question. Good question. All right, so preoperational thought limitations, their inability to conserve. They don't grasp that an object's physical characteristics remain the same even when their appearance changes. They will focus on one aspect and neglect the others. I'll explain what that means on the next slide, I think. They experience what's called irreversibility. They can't mentally undo a series of steps. If they could, they can go, oh, then that wouldn't be okay. Then there's the lack of hierarchical classification, where they cannot organize objects into classes and subclasses based on similarities and differences. I'll explain what that means in a second. So the inability to conserve, right? They ask a child, say it's a 4-year-old, are there the same number of pennies in each row? And they'll say yes. Then they take the bottom row and they smush them together. And they'll say, no, the top one has more now. Just because it's taken up more space. They'll say, is there the same amount of clay in each ball? They'll say yes. Then they'll smash it right in front of them. Then they'll say, no, now this one has more. They'll say, do these 2 cups have the same amount of water? They'll say yes. And they'll pour one into a wider bowl or a wider cup. And they'll say which one has more. And they'll say this one. Same here. Which one has same weight? Then they smash one. Which one has more weight? And they'll say this one. So that's due to both centration and irreversibility. They're focusing on one aspect. In this case, they're focusing on length. If it's longer, then it's more. This one, height. If it's taller, it's more. Height. If it's taller, it's more. Height. If it's taller, it's more. They're also incapable of reversibility. So they're experiencing irreversibility, meaning if they mentally undid, because remember, they pushed these pennies together right in front of them. They smushed these balls. They poured the water into another container and they smushed the clay. They did it right in front of them. If they could mentally undo that and go, well, if I just push the pennies back, then they'd be the same still. Or if I just push the clay back together, it'd be the same amount still. If I took that water that poured into that bowl and poured it back into the cup, it'd be the same amount still, that kind of thing. So they're experiencing irreversibility and they're focusing on one aspect. In this case, it'd be height or length. So this lack of hierarchical classification, they asked the kids, they asked them, one at a time, are there more red flowers or flowers? And they will focus on the one aspect, in this case, red flowers. And so they'll say there are more red flowers than there are flowers, when in fact there are 16 total, but they'll say there are more red, which is only 12 of the 16. Because they're not, that's the hierarchical classification, right? They're not able to separate red and blue classification from just flower. Like they're all a part of flower. So there's the flower, and then the subcategories of, well, blue ones and red ones. They can't go back between the hierarchy, the classification, the steps. So follow-up research on pre-operational thought found that when it comes to egocentrism, they were able to take others' perspectives more than they thought. The animistic and magical beliefs result from incomplete knowledge of objects. That the logical thought, the conservation was evident on even simplified tasks. So basically what he had done, Piaget, is he had undermined children's abilities. And I just learned this, that his theory of cognitive development, the 4 stages, the sensorimotor, the pre-operational, concrete operational, formal operational stages, those came from studying his own kids. Any questions about this so far? All right, I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. I have to update the attendance before I forget because people keep showing up. Okay. Cassidy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Did you show up because of daylight savings? Or are you just late?
No, I'm just late today, sorry.
Okay, all right. Just checking. All right. So the evaluation of Piaget's pre-operational stage, the development of logical operations is gradual. He thought it was more concrete, stage-like. You're either in this stage or you're in that stage, when there's a lot of overlap. And does a pre-operational stage really exist? Some experts deny the stage approach, right? Others support a flexible stage notion, a related set of competencies that develops over an extended period, that it's not all these things, object permanence and all that, housed just in, sensor motor. So now educational principles that came from Piaget's theory: discovery learning, sensitivity to children's readiness to learn, and the acceptance of individual differences. Going back to Vygotsky, right? He said that, Lev Vygotsky said that, we learn things by having experts model them for us. He called it scaffolding. So the expert guidance gradually leads to self-guidance. There's something called private speech, right? Where they're literally, it's awesome, but little kids will talk to themselves as they're working out problems. They'll be like, and then this goes over here, and then this goes over there, right? What they're doing is they're organizing their thoughts, but they're just putting it out there, but they're talking to themselves. The zone of proximal development, again, that's where, you provide an experience for a child that's out of their, range of abilities, and then you kind of scaffold them. You help them get to that next level. So private speech, right? This is children's self-directed speech. Piaget would have called it egocentric speech because you're talking about, what's going on in your own head. Vygotsky said it was the foundation for all higher cognitive processes, meaning that our right here at the bottom, it says it becomes silent eventually. Think about when we do things. Don't we think when we're doing them? Like, I mean, not always, but I mean, most things when we're solving problems, aren't we thinking in like speech? Like, three-letter word for, Arctic, whatever. You're thinking it. Like you're, but a child is saying it out loud. So Vygotsky said it was the foundation, this private speech, for all higher cognitive processes. So self-guidance that often follows scaffolding will increase during challenging tasks. The zone of proximal development, a range of tasks that are too difficult for the child to do alone, but possible with the help of others. So scaffolding, right, is where adults will aid learning by adjusting the support to the child's performance level. And this varies by culture because different cultures have different daily practices. So assisted discovery, where the teacher guides learning, they will tailor the assistant to each child's zone of proximal development. So each child has their own zone around, meaning like what they're capable of, their own stage of development. And the teacher then will work specifically, individually, differently with different students. How does it also impact education? Peer collaboration, right? So by working in groups, make believe play also has an impact on our cognitive development. So the cultural influences. So in children in village and tribal cultures observe and participate in adult work. So if you have Western developed cultures, they emphasize child-focused activities, color, draw, make silly putty, make slime, watch this Sesame Street, whatever. There's little access to adult work. The adults focus on preparing the children for school success. But in village and tribal cultures, they emphasize participation in adult work. Help pick up sticks, help, cut this, help bring the water here, right? They observe the adult tasks, and there's rarely conversation or scaffolding. Self-sufficiency and strong self-care skills develop as a result, and assuming additional responsibility with adult prompting, meaning over time, the child will be carrying more and more water home, will be cutting more and more, fruit off of whatever. The evaluation of Vygotsky's theory. It focuses on verbal dialogues. It de-emphasizes other routes to cognitive development, right? So just he emphasized, this whole scaffolding process as, a child's learning through, observing the expert, which would be the adult, and then the adult will, get on their knees or sit down with the child and go and start talking and saying, okay, this is where you do the bunny ears, and it's like teaching a kid to do the tying their shoes and the rabbit hole, or I don't know, there's something like that. I never learned tying my shoes that way at all. I don't remember how I learned tying my shoes. This helps us understand cultural variation in cognition. It says little about how basic capacities, like our perceptual and physical differences, will contribute to higher cognitive processes. It's focusing a lot, if not all, on this learning through expert scaffolding. All right, that's as far as I wanted to cover today, which is a good place to stop. So, okay, if you haven't taken your quiz, it's due by midnight tonight. Again, the class average currently is at 93. I'm going to stop recording.